Research Resources Speaker Feature, where we sit down with a presenter for one of our upcoming events. Today, we're sitting down with Navlika Ratangee, who is a clinical psychologist and the managing director of ICAS Southern Africa. She will be speaking at the upcoming HR Directors Conference on the 9th and 10th of March, and we're so excited to have her. Navlika has, of course, worked on a few projects with us before, and it is so good to have her back. Navlika, just for those who haven't met you before or seen some of our work together, could you introduce yourself and give us a brief overview of your professional history?
Sure. Thank you, Amy, and compliments of the new year to you and all the listeners. I really hope that it's a prosperous 2022 for everyone. So my name is Navlika Ratangee, as you've mentioned. I'm currently the managing director of ICAS Southern Africa. I'm a clinical psychologist by profession, with a business background, with an MBA. And recently, we've just worked on launching the book, Improving Mental Health in the Workplace, which is really something that I'm incredibly excited about in terms of spreading the word, creating more awareness around mental health issues locally and globally.
Amazing. And of course, the Improving Mental Health in the Workplace book ties in very nicely with your topic for the upcoming conference, which is creating a care culture. And you worked with many experts in the employee wellness fields and surrounding fields for the book. Just drawing on that experience and your professional experience as a psychologist, could you explain to us what a care culture is and why leaders should care about implementing it?
Sure. I think first and foremost, as business leaders, we often expect our people to bring the best of themselves to the workplace in order to get the job done well. However, we don't always think about the ingredients that are needed in order to create that right environment for employees to thrive. And now it is more important than ever before to create that culture of care, to send that message out loud and clear that as an employer, we care about you as an employee. We care about you and your whole self. So not just the part that we expect you to perform in. We need to understand the context that you come from and the context that really enables you to perform at your best. And recognizing you as a whole human being. And, gone are the days with the concept of leave your problems at the door. When you walk into the workplace, you focus on work. That's very sort of old-fashioned thinking in terms of how workplaces conduct themselves and the kinds of environments that they work towards creating. Now it really is about accepting that as an employee, as a human being, there are many things that you may be going through and experiencing in life. And I think the pandemic has played a positive role in really highlighting this for employers. That we have to recognize that there are a whole host of issues that impact an employee's ability to perform. And it's not just about performance as well. It's not just about looking at getting the best performance out of your employee. It really also needs to resonate with the employee that I feel cared for in this organization as a human being, not just because that brings out the best performance in me, but I feel like I belong. It's an organization with purpose, as they call it. And more employees are looking for this element in their workplaces in order to stay in their workplaces. We've heard about the Great Resignation and the link that has to employees feeling like they really matter and that their mental health matters as well. So that's sort of just some insight into why creating a culture of care is so important. And maybe just to add to that, Amy, it's not just as simple as, we have a restaurant for people, we have a gym, and we have a hairdresser on site or whatever it might be, and we've ticked the boxes and we're creating that culture of care. So it's not just about the conveniences. It really is much more nuanced than that. It's about the team dynamic. It's about creating psychological trust within the workplace, within the team. And now in the hybrid way of working and virtual ways of working, we need to be thinking about being intentional about creating a virtual culture of care, which is even more complex and can be more complex than just about creating a culture of care.
So much to think about there. And I'm sure for many of the leaders attending, this will be a very important topic as more and more organizations recognize the need and benefits for the betterment of mental health in the workplace. Now, we'll be diving a little bit more into the ingredients of creating a culture of care at the conference itself. But what advice would you offer HR leaders in terms of their personal development? What can they do to better prepare themselves to lead a culture of care?
It sounds like a simple question, Amy, but I think we can do a full day workshop just on this question alone, because it's not even surprising that so many leaders ask this question in terms of how do I actually do this practically? It doesn't come naturally to many people, and we do need to recognize that and hold that so that we are creating more resources and tools to become more readily available to leaders to apply within the workplace, rather than judge them for it not coming automatically to them and their leadership style. And I think the first ingredient that leaders can focus on in terms of their personal development is becoming self-aware as a leader. So we are all vulnerable to mental health concerns and how we are coping on a day-to-day basis. We'll talk a lot more about the stats within the conference itself and paint that picture in terms of the levels of vulnerability, especially on a leadership level as well. Right now, they seem to be the most vulnerable sort of group within workplaces, funny enough. And often it's ignored in terms of their ability to cope with stress as just one element of mental health. So being self-aware as a leader is going to give important insights into where are some of the places that you can restore your own energy as a leader? Where are some of the places that you are feeling depleted of energy as a leader as well? And that starts to give some inclination into where do we build? Where do we top up those skills for that particular leader? And also bearing in mind that authenticity is also very important. So it is a very personalized approach. It's an individual journey that a leader needs to go on in terms of really being able to build this culture of care within the organization as well. It needs to be felt as authentic. And it needs to sit well with the leader in order for the concern and the interest to be shared genuinely and for the employee to really feel that. But just to maybe leave the listeners with one practical tip in asking about creating that self-awareness, it's also about giving yourself permission as a leader to recognize that you don't have to always have all the answers. And you don't always have to show up in a way that suggests that you've got everything under control, that it's okay to really show that vulnerability to your team, have that discussion with your team and say, I actually don't know how to answer this question, or I don't know how to do X, Y, and Z. I need more information about X, Y, and Z. So that it starts to show that authenticity and the vulnerability. And it also starts to create the platform for your employees to also be vulnerable in that space. And to go one level deeper in terms of opening up where employees are really at, what is affecting them, what are the challenges that they're facing, and creating the space to problem solve together. So doing those meaningful check-ins become really important.
It's so incredible to me that you have all this insight, Navlika, because you actually took the reins as managing director during an incredibly difficult time, starting your role at the beginning of the pandemic. Do you have any advice for our listeners, any lessons that you learned from being a leader in such an unprecedented time?
Yeah, it's not the easiest of questions to answer, Amy, because I do think it is an incredibly difficult time to be a leader in general. I think there's a lot more demand being placed on leaders and their ability to show heart-centered leadership in a time like this. So yeah, it's a difficult time to be a leader in general, let alone taking on sort of a new responsibility or an increased responsibility in leadership at this point in time. But certainly the one thing that I have been humbled by over the past year and a bit is really just recognizing, firstly, the strength that human beings have in terms of coping with difficulties, and really celebrating that, because I think it can really bring hope to others in terms of just human tenacity, and how people deal with difficult situations, and creating the opportunity for people to share those experiences with one another. But then at the same time, also recognizing that not everybody is in the space where they are coping. Some people are really struggling with everything that is going on, has been going on, and is still to come as well. And so thinking about it, not just from a short-term perspective, but really thinking about it in terms of how do we create the space for people to feel okay, to not be okay. I know that sounds cliche, but it's very true. So creating the space for that, and you know, simple things that we've done in our organization, even on a management team level, in our management team meetings, for example, is often we'd start off the meeting with doing really valuable and deeper level check-ins with how is everybody coping? What are some of the challenges you've faced this week? And it has nothing to do with work, actually. I remember the unrest that we experienced in South Africa around July last year. And it was such an important time to just show that actually, before anything else, before all of our roles within an organization, we are all humans and we are all affected by what's going on around us. So really just understanding, where do people find themselves? Are their families safe? Are they feeling safe at that point in time? What do they need? And sometimes that agenda would take over the actual agenda of the work that is needed to discuss for that day. And it's okay. We have to create the space for that in order to be relevant, in order to show that heart-centered leadership. So I think it's also about being present, recognizing what it is that people need at that point in time, creating the space for that in the short term, and making the space for that in how we operate as a team in the long term as well. Because I think that's what makes people feel like they belong. And we all human, we all need to feel like we belong. And that's what creates a culture of care.
Now, once you started implementing these longer check-ins, what was your experience? Did you receive any employee feedback or see a shift in the culture?
So, I mean, I've definitely seen that people feel more ready and able to share. And it has set the tone for how we engage as a team on a more regular basis. It wasn't just a once-off kind of event, but it did open the doorway to people feeling a lot more comfortable to share when things are going well and not going well. And we need that context in order to problem solve for a business as a whole, to understand where are people feeling the gaps, and how do we step up and step in so that we're not compromised as a business as a whole. And, you know, sometimes people, if they're feeling like they need to keep their guard up all the time, and they're feeling like they need to always show up, that they're coping and things are running well, that's when you actually hit more problems. Because then you're not aware of the issues that are brewing behind the scenes, and then it sort of hits you, and then it's a bit of a crisis, as opposed to really setting the tone of problem solving together. So yeah, definitely seen that difference.
One of the things that I think the HR Directors Conference really offers its attendees is this opportunity to almost practice a culture of care. We have leaders from all over the world really coming together and discussing the issues, the challenges that they face, the situations that they've been in, and really working through that together and sharing and learning from each other. So in a way, the conference really is practicing the culture of care in a way. But I would like to ask you, Navlika, just from your experience with KR and the projects you've worked on with us, what makes this project different? What makes the HR Directors Conference different?
So I definitely feel that leaders have been severely impacted over the past 2 years in specific, largely brought up by the pandemic. And in the same breath, that leaders have been largely ignored in terms of trying to make sure that everything's running from an organizational perspective, making sure that their teams are being looked after, and not really taking the time to recognize that they may also be struggling with certain issues, which has a direct impact on their ability to sort of implement those very same things within the organization. So the fact that this particular conference is aimed at leaders, by leaders, I think creates a very unique opportunity for the content to firstly be hugely relevant and practical as well, because that's one of the objectives of the conference, so that leaders walk away with a lot of tools in their pocket around what they can implement sort of immediately and within the short term as well. So I do think leaders will take away pieces, valuable nuggets of information that will resonate with them and that they can implement, that will have a huge impact on their leadership and leadership style now and into the future. We talk about being future ready as leaders, future ready as employees, creating future fit organizations as well. And I think that that's really where this conference is aimed at, which makes it a really valuable tool in terms of firstly attending the conference and walking away with those valuable nuggets. It's a difficult time to be a leader, as I mentioned, and I think we can all do with some support from people that are walking that journey, and what's working and what's not working, to shortcut our learning process as well, in what can we do that will make a difference.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Navlika. I'm really looking forward to your presentation, as well as the presentations of many of our other speakers. If any of our listeners would like to sign up for the conference, there will be a link available in the description. And if any of our listeners would like to read the Improving Mental Health in the Workplace book, which we discussed in this interview, there will be a link for that as well. Navlika, thank you so much for joining me.
Amy, thanks for having me. I look forward to meeting our attendees at the conference.